Welcome to the first video on my YouTube channel. I wanted to hop on here and just kind of talk a little bit about my story when it comes to ATG specific training, why I am a product of it, and why I am now currently helping other people as well reap the harvest of training with intention and truly training the right way. To begin with, my name is Handre Reineke. I was born in South Africa, moved out here in 2009. That was when I first started to play basketball. All the way up until my freshman year of high school, which was in 2016, I had zero injuries outside of just the chronic, growing fast injuries of Osgood Slaughter and things like that that are a little bit more common for people who grow very fast. I was a tall kid. I'm 6'7" now, and I grew fast. And so my body had a little bit more stress on it than normal. But outside of that, I didn't have any major acute injuries until 2017, which was the end of my freshman year. I played on JV as a freshman and had a pretty decent year up until the second to last game of league when I went up for a layup. I came down and I broke my ankle. And that was the beginning of what would be a long 2.5 years of me just struggling with injuries. And that was the first one. They gave me 6 weeks and said, "You'll be fine, I'll get back and then everything will be normal." Did my physical therapy, I got after it. I went through the 6 weeks and then I came back. And that spring season, I played AAU. I was very passionate, very excited, and very determined to play on varsity as my sophomore year and to actually get minutes. So I believed that putting in time, getting reps through AAU would be the way to do that. Obviously, I sat out for 6 weeks after the season had ended. Had a pretty good off season. A week before our actual preseason began and the games would start to count and the practices were consistent and all those things, which would happen the first week of November for us. I went back and that weekend before, literally the weekend before we were about to start doing our consistent practices, I went up to block somebody and I blocked him and I came down. I was turning because I had shifted my body, landed with my left leg, planted that leg, and twisted. My body's momentum kept twisting, and I dislocated this left knee. Completely dislocated the kneecap out of the actual knee. Fell on the ground. I remember sitting there. I grabbed my hand. I just pushed it over. So at that point, I felt fine. There was no pain. It might have been the shock, might have been the adrenaline, whatever it was. Went to the urgent care. Got a full leg brace, and they told me 6 weeks, go to a knee specialist and do your PT and you'll be fine. So I did that, 6 weeks of PT, all those things. Went through the whole courses of everything that you would do, stim and ice and band work and everything you could think of. And then I started to slowly make my way back in. So from November 2017, so my sophomore year of high school, so from November until mid-December, I was out just doing PT, sitting on the sideline, watching the varsity team play, doing the scoreboard, cheering my guys on, and then just working on me. I didn't play a single game during that whole time, obviously. And then after those 6 weeks, I was allowed to begin to practice, non-contact practicing, and I practiced just a little bit for a few weeks, and then a few weeks of live practice where there was full contact. And then starting in the new year, so it would have been 2018, I started to play full contact. And I began playing on the JV team and played there a few games, pretty much finished out the league with them. And then for playoffs, I went up back to varsity and played with them. After that season had ended, went back to play AAU, and our first tournament went down to SoCal to play in a tournament in Anaheim. And went up for a rebound, landed on a guy's foot and broke my other ankle. Came back and of course the high school coach was not happy the first time it happened, at the beginning of the sophomore season, when I dislocated my knee the week before we start. And then he was not very happy with me either when I came back to him with a broken ankle from this AAU tournament once again, and had to sit out for 6 weeks of our off-season work in preparation for next year. And so I had to miss those 6 weeks. Went through the same thing, physical therapy. For the rest of that summer, this would have been summer of 2018, I went to college camps, tournaments, AAU tournaments, things like that. During that time was when I really started to feel the impact of the subluxations that I was getting. I was getting lots of subluxations in the knee that I dislocated, which is pretty much what happens during a subluxation is that kneecap, it moves out of socket like it would with the dislocation. The only difference is it doesn't stay out of socket, so it comes right back into the socket. Nonetheless, that still causes damage though, because it's pulling on the tissues, it's grinding over the connective tissue, all those things are happening. The whole rest of that summer after I healed from the ankle injury, and then the first part of my junior year, which would have been fall of 2018, I played for the first 5 weeks or so of that season. I played, and late into that that preseason. I think it was about 2 weeks or a week before we were supposed to leave to go on our biannual trip that we do at the end of the preseason. We were supposed to go to San Diego that year. And so there was a tournament that we had before that called the Melgood tournament. That was up in Yuba City. And at that tournament, I was coming back on defense. I stepped and I was kind of going backwards and my knee collapsed and my knee dislocated once again. And that was the injury that really started to begin this journey of finding out what works. After that, I was presented with a decision. I went to a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, and spoke with him about what to do. And he essentially gave me two options. One was I get the surgery right now and have potentially 6 to 9 months to recover, miss the rest of my junior season for sure without a doubt, and potentially maybe be 100% for half of my senior year. Or I could play through this injury and just kind of push through it, grind it out for the rest of my junior season, and then get the surgery after the season was done, and then miss that first portion of the senior season in hopes that I would be okay or 100% by the second half of my senior season. Those are the two options he gave me. The decision wasn't a matter of if I had to get the surgery, it was a matter of this is the only thing that's left. That was when I really had to look to something outside of what I have been doing. Up until that point, I had been lifting weights. I've been doing traditional weightlifting and Olympic lifting and some powerlifting and obviously lots of physical therapy and all of those things, but none of them had worked for me because I kept having these reoccurring injuries. That's when I remember I was talking to a guy and I kind of told him about my knee problems because he was interested as to what was going on. And he told me that he had used this system called ATG for his knees and he was a professional dunker. I got very intrigued by that. And so I remember during the midst of this decision of when to get the surgery, I realized that there was still something else I hadn't tried yet. I didn't want to potentially risk giving up my season, my junior or my senior season. I decided to give the ATG a shot. It was unorthodox. It's something I hadn't tried before, and I'd heard good things of it. I began with that in January, February of 2019, and from that point on, that was the moment that I started working with Ben Patrick, and we started to go through the old traditional ATG system. Long story short is that system and the time that I put in from the end of my junior year until the beginning of my senior year in November of 2019, I put so much time and effort into doing the right things, the things that were actually beneficial, the things that actually made sense practically to build your body up and not break it down, that my senior season, I missed one game the whole entire season, and that was because I had a wedding to be at, not because I was hurt or injured. I started every single one of those games, except for the one I missed and the one after that, right? And ATG really helped me actually be able to play the game that I love without having the need to worry about how I land, without having the need of the mental anxiety behind whether or not I'm gonna get hurt if I really go all out and really try to jump as hard as I can and really try to attack and try to dunk on people and try to do all those things. It gave my body the confidence to be able to take my weakness, which was my knee and my ankles and my joints, and turn them into a strength, which was the athleticism of being able to outjump people and being able to work harder than people because I didn't have those things holding me back. But that's one of the greatest things that ATG does is it turns your weaknesses into strengths. It turns what is pain and it makes it potential in your life. And that's a great thing in itself right there, and good enough in my opinion to make a difference. And so ultimately the decision that I ended up making was I was betting on ATG and I was betting on myself instead of all the implications that you deal with when you get a surgery like that. That decision ended up really paying off. The rest of this video I'm going to walk through the system that I used back then to get me to be able to play my entire senior season without worrying about hurting my knees again and actually being successful and not being limited by my knees, but rather my knees opening up the freedom for me to do whatever I wanted to do on the court and do it with confidence. The ATG process that always began with sled. Sled is an essential for our knees, and it's something that I really grew to love because what it did is it also got me in insanely good basketball shape, and it really introduced the daily pump that I got in the knee and around the knee. And what's beautiful about the sled is the sled's not going to move unless you can move it, which means it's very difficult for you to get hurt. The other thing about the sled is it's really easy to regress it, either taking weight off of the sled or taking smaller steps. And it's really easy to progress it as well safely because you can very easily add weight or go faster or take longer steps. Sled is one of the best things you can do to really build up your knees. And so that's what we would begin with every single session. And a big part of that, which was the fact that we nearly every single session went from our feet and built our way up the body. And so this principle helps, especially those who are basketball players, because basketball players don't need a lot of upper body strength. We need more legs than we need upper body strength. And ultimately, any excess upper body strength that we have, or fat or mass just in general, is going to put more force and put more weight that our legs have to be able to move, right? So the leaner you are, the stronger your legs are, the better in basketball. What we would do before we did anything to do with extension of the knee and working on the knee after the sleds is we would do triple flexion. Now these are the movements that specifically help us with the reverse of what we typically do. When we run and we come to a stop, we are using our decelerators to slow us down before we exchange the force to go in a different direction or to go up into a jump or whatever it is. And in order to decelerate, that begins with your ankles, specifically your tibialis muscle, because the tibialis muscle is what brings the foot down. So if you can get really strong tibs, then you can start to begin working on protecting your knees and limiting the load on your knees by getting a stronger tibialis, a stronger decelerator of the foot. That was what we would begin most sessions with, is our tibs. Up against the wall or with the tib bar. It was always, again, with the intention of getting stronger and also working to get a pump. What this did for me, at least I noticed, it doesn't directly strengthen the knee, but it does indirectly strengthen the knee, again, by mitigating the forces, limiting the forces on the knee from jumping and landing specifically, and changing directions, anything to do with deceleration. It also helped to get blood into the area that's right underneath the knee or nearby the knee, and therefore it even helped prep me even more for what would come later in the session. Second part of triple flexion is our knees. Back then, I did Nordics. The first video I actually ever took that I still have of me doing ATG is doing Nordics. I used little bands to try to get my feet down, and I realize now how much harder that would have made it. Nonetheless, I did Nordics for that. Nordics are essential, and training knee flexion especially is essential, because training the back of the knee is something that a lot of people don't think of. People think of training knee extension, of training the front of the knee to get stronger, to jump higher and all those things. But once again, if it isn't balanced out by the strength in the back of the knee, then you're going to be limited by the back of the knee, no matter how strong the front of the knee is. By bringing the strength up in the back and balancing out the front and the back of the knee, it opens up, again, the potential of so much more. That's why training the back of the knee was important. The Nordics also are really, really good for sprinting and jumping and all those things, especially single leg jumping, because there's so much to do with our hamstrings when it comes to those explosive movements. Third part of triple flexion was hip flexors. Back then, what I did was hanging knee raises with weights, and with the intention of specifically thinking about my hip flexors. Training your hip flexors is one of the most important things you could do for sprinting, because being able to pick up your leg fast and effectively is very, very important. If you can pick up your leg faster, then you're going to be faster than someone else when it comes to running. And then also when it comes to single leg jumping, it plays a really big component there as well. When the knees come up, you are creating momentum, you are transferring the momentum that you've made from running forward to going up. And all of that was in preparation as well for what would come, which is our direct squat work and different types of squat variations. The first squat variation that we would do was reverse step-ups. Typically, we would begin with Patrick step-ups, go on to Poliquin step-ups, and then finally do Peterson step-ups. And intentionally putting the knee over the toe, but it also trains the exact movement that you do during a jump. And so therefore it would also help you be better at jumping as well. These we would typically do 5 to 10 sets. I believe we did 10 sets of 10 reps or 5 sets of 20 reps. And again, the intention was really just to try to get strong in these positions when your knee is over your toe. Depending on what you did with the ankle would dictate how much you had to use your foot and your ankle as well. Each variation is different. So with the Patrick step up, you have to actually work on your ankle mobility as you continue to raise height, which is one of the progressions. And for the Poliquin step up, you remove ankle mobility and therefore put more emphasis on the actual knee joint by allowing your knee to move more over your toe. The Peterson step up is also heel up, again allowing toe to go over, but you're limited by your actual foot strength because you have to maintain that heel up position. And if you look at jumping, that position with heel up and toes down is exactly the same angle that you would get with a typical jump. That was also very transferable to basketball. Second one that we would go to is ATG split squats. These are split squats where you are doing one side at a time, right? And you're going full range of motion, trying to get your knee as far over your toe as possible. This is probably the movement that bulletproofed my knees the most, that strengthened my knees internally and truly built up my connective tissue. Also lengthened my hip flexors, which helped me to get even better. This movement is also one of the ways that I rebalanced my knees and my legs, because all my injuries had happened on my left side. It allowed me to rebuild one side at a time. The ATG split squat has so many benefits. It's truly remarkable. It works on your hip flexor length and your ankles, ankle mobility, the front ankle mobility, and then the big one is the front knee. When you're working through that full range of motion, recently studies have shown this, even though Pam Patrick knew this back then, going full range of motion with the knee will actually build connective tissue, will actually build up your tissue resiliency. Doing this one leg at a time and progressing with it over time would then build up your tissue resiliency. And it did for me. So that's what we would do next. And then finally, we would go into our actual squats. I believe these were VMO squats back then, but we did add weight over time, and we most likely did 10 sets of 10 reps. One of the best ways as well for me that I believe that I got in lots of reps in that full range position of the squats, and therefore it built up my knee even more. These were also great though at the same time for building up my vertical jump, because once again, there was a lot of similar angles that happened during a jump that would happen during a squat. And so getting those reps in would replicate that movement and that positioning a lot, and therefore prepare me even better for jumping down the road. That was the primary ways that we would train knee extension. Then we would also do calf raises every now and then. Typically those were only single leg calf raises, so full range of motion with weight, and those were specifically training ankle extension and getting better at that as well, which is very important once again for basketball, especially because you are jumping and pushing off of one leg so much. Then our Patrick step-ups, split squats, and squats would all specifically more intentionally train knee extension and the knees in general, the knee health and strength. And then we would move on to hip extension. And the one primary movement that we used for hip extension was RDLs, and getting really, really good with these. And once again, going through a full range of motion and strengthening those RDLs in that lengthened position as well. And then coming up and squeezing the glutes to the top would help with that hip extension, which is equally important again for power and also speed and everything to do with that strength, hypertrophy, anything that you can really name when it comes to the hammies and glutes. The RDLs are one of the best. Finally, you got to earn your upper body. For a basketball player, you needed to be stronger in your legs than you did in upper body. You needed more mass in your legs than you did in your upper body. And therefore, by focusing first on the legs, you are giving attention where it needs to be. And that really helped. For upper body, it started with the low back, and specifically back extensions. These are really important because the core itself in basketball is you're moving so much. You're reaching, you're turning, you're doing all types of stuff. You're extending sometimes you have to get low sometimes. And so it's a very dynamic positioning for the low back. And this is something just in general for people when it comes to low back strength is you should really try to train every single movement. And that includes spinal flexion and extension, or we did back extensions to train that back extension strength. And we also did Jefferson curls to train the spinal flexion and the back flexion strength as well. A combination of those two things gave me a really solid core. And then on top of that, we did train some of our rotation and some of the things to do with that. And specifically, we targeted a muscle specifically called the quadratus laborum. And this muscle is a little muscle in the low back, and it's something that causes a lot of injuries with rotation and reaching and turning and all of those things. By training these things, you're training both the sides, right, of the back and the front and the back. You're really looking at your spine and your core as something that wraps all the way around and training in every movement, in every position. And that can truly bulletproof your core and your low back. I didn't really have back issues, but nonetheless, it helped me in every single way possible because as a basketball player, there's a lot of stability need. And so it helped a lot with that. Finally, we move up to the upper body. Our primary 3 movements for the upper body, which is still the same today for me, which was dips, chins, and shoulders. And so dips all the time, 24/7 for shoulder health. They are the full range of motion squats for the shoulders. Dips are one of the best things you can do, and also one of the best ways to build a really, really nice upper body when it comes to pushing. And it actually helps you build your chest and your triceps and everything else in there. And the nice thing about dips too is it really reinforces when you go all the way down to get that full stretch. It really opens up the chest. So dips are great for that. Did lots of dips and then lots of chin-ups, right? So these were neutral grip chin-ups where we were here and we were going full range of motion all the way down and then all the way up with the big chest, trying to get your hand to your shoulder nice and close. The combination of those two things alone really, I think, was enough for me as a basketball player because it did help me get bigger as a basketball player and to be able to use my size up top as well and help with my grip strength, from the hanging knee raises and from the pull-ups, the chin-ups, help me get my grip strength stronger as well. And then the final component for the upper body, the primary component for the upper body movements was a shoulder press. And so we would have our hands here, open it up, and do our shoulders here with good posture as well. So those are the 3 compound movements that we really focused on for upper body back then. Finally, we moved into some accessories, right? One was a pullover. This was really meant to target opening up the shoulders and opening up your posture and really focusing on opening up the mid and upper back. These are really effective for those things. It's one of the best ways to create that mobility in your shoulders and your upper back. And then from there, we did 2 types of external rotation movements. One was actual seated external rotations where we would isolate that movement here, right, and start to work on building up the back of the shoulder. Reversing this, right, reversing this and trying to open up the shoulders. External rotation helped a lot. For me, I believe when it comes to someone who shoots a lot, spends a lot of time shooting, right, and spends a lot of time pushing and doing a lot of this, it's useful to do some of the reverse of that as well to really balance out the shoulders and the elbows and all those things. And then finally, what we would do is I would spam banded pull aparts, right? So red band, go on pull aparts here. And again, it's the same idea as we're really trying to open up and really build a stronger body. But realistically, out of those things, I didn't really have a whole lot of upper body stuff when I was doing this. My primary motivation for doing ATG was to rescue my knees, and it did. It went beyond rescuing my knees. It helped me dominate in a place where there was a weakness before. But nonetheless, I got a lot of upper body benefit out of it as well. And I did get my upper body to a point of where it did benefit me and it didn't hold me back in basketball. With that being said though, basketball players still don't really need a whole lot of upper body. They need some, but legs are more important when it comes to basketball. So with that being said, there's just a couple of principles I like to cover which really help. Building from the ground up and earning your upper body. And then also the last one, which is strength through length. Now, a lot of the movements that he picks were intentionally picked for this reason as well. You could pretty much think of this as flexibility with weights. And so movements like the ATG split squat, RDLs, Nordics, a lot of those full range of motion squats, the dips, the pull-ups, they actually are very intentional about working through a full range of motion and making sure that you hit every single range of a motion of any movement or joint, because that actually helps you build up that connective tissue like I was saying earlier. But it also benefits your flexibility and mobility. That was definitely the other big part of ATG, was there was a lot of stretching. And I remember I would spend all my time, whenever I did anything to do with entertainment, when I was watching YouTube videos, when I would watch TV, I was always stretching. It was a simple piriformis stretch, either in a pigeon or on the wall, and then it was a seated pancake or a pancake on the wall stretch. And then finally, it was our couch stretch. I would spend so much time in those positions and it helped me immensely. One of the most important things when it comes to strength through length and flexibility, and why it's so important, especially for performance athletes, is because if you're limited, if one side of your muscle is pulling and it's tight, then you are limited as to how much range you have access to on the other side of the muscle, which means that you're not going to be able to reach the full maximum potential of the muscle's performance and strength and explosiveness because you're tight. And so by opening up the muscles and being more flexible, you're giving yourself more access to be more powerful. I know many people think that flexibility actually decreases performance, but static stretching specifically decreases performance temporarily for a few moments, but it doesn't actually overall in the long run do anything for your performance. If anything, it enhances it, because once again, it's unlocking more ability because you have more to work with. And so you're able to unlock and reach the actual muscle's full capabilities because of that. So that's what I would do, is I would spend a lot of time stretching every single day. And that was the system essentially that helped me recover and build up my knees to the point of where I was pain-free when I played basketball. And then it really got me to the point of when I was able to play with confidence without having to worry about pain. And ultimately then that opened the door for me to now be my actual best and actually give my best and actually have the mental peace that comes with being able to give your best. I highly recommend that for any athletes watching this that are dealing with pain or anything like that, it's most of the time unnecessary. You don't need it. And even though you may think that you can just think through it and push through it and be okay and still give your best, which I know you can because I did the same thing, it truly will never be your best if you're in pain, because you can be better without the pain. And ultimately that was one of the biggest learning lessons that I got from ATG is pain is not always necessary. And when it is there, all it means is that there is potential behind that pain. And if you can get rid of the pain, then you can access that potential. And so it's very, very important that you don't neglect pain. It's a signal from our body. It's an indicator that something is wrong. And when you fix it, the ability and the freedom that comes from it is very, very beneficial and very liberating. And like ATG taught me as well, is it's not a matter of avoiding the pain. It's not a matter of avoiding the weakness. It's not a matter of avoiding the places of vulnerability, but rather confronting them at the level that you can, and then over time progressing and getting stronger and stronger and stronger until you get to the point of where you have unleashed your potential and your ability to do what you want to do with freedom. In my book, ATG is a big success. I know it's built on practical wisdom, not always on scientific proven things, which some may not agree with, but ultimately if it works, success leaves clues, and at the end of the day, success and results are what matter the most. And ATG gave me the results that I needed to be able to do what I love again without having to worry about pain, and do it to the best of my ability because I was able to not think about the pain. And I'm truly grateful for that. And I would encourage you, if you are dealing with pain of any sort, of any type, go over to ATG and work with a coach there. That's my ATG story. I hope you had a good time listening. If you are here, then thank you. And at this point, it's just a matter of asking you to subscribe, if you will, and continue to be updated with my coaching. I'm an ATG coach now, and I like the video. If it's something you resonated with or something that you learned, I would really appreciate it. And leave any comments of any pain that you've struggled with, that you might have overcome, anything that, questions you might have for me as someone who's walked that path before, and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Until the next time, signing off.